Yeah. So, hey everyone, we're live. We're waiting for people to trickle in, but in the meantime, yeah, just the idle chatter about Andrew Tate, and Greta Thunberg, and it's
Yeah.
like for people who don't, I try to stay away from hearing anything about either of those two individuals, but
Yeah.
it's a little funny. I mean, it's funny how like Twitter is just such a wild place. I didn't know anything about this Tate character until very recently when some crypto people started to get like involved with them or whatever. And
Mm.
first, funny enough, when you look into his like background, he was actually like, oh, he used to be a kickboxer. It's like, yeah, sure, big guy, but no, he was actually like one of the best kickboxers in the world with a
Yeah.
okay MMA career and like a bunch of other stuff, like an accomplished gentleman. But then I guess once he retired, because your body can't keep up as a professional athlete forever, he just went into this whole like selling courses to like insecure young men kind of grift, and then
Yeah. I mean, that seems like the play. Once you become successful, to stay successful, you sell the idea of your success. But it's like, are you teaching them to be world professional kickboxers, or like they're not doing what you did?
yeah, and the thing is, there's a definite value to there's a lot of people that just are looking for general life guidance and things. They're like, what do I need to get going? And
Hmm.
I'm kind of like torn on the self help thing because on the one hand, it's like a 90% scam, like just total scam. And
Hmm.
on the other hand, there's still 10% of like people need this. So I think it's more of like it's kind of like with crypto, like how often you talk about the price. It's like I just don't want to talk about it at all because I don't care, right? But then at the
Yeah.
same time, some things you have to mention, you have to dip your toes in. I'm trying to find the right balance. So I think the right balance is just become a popular influencer, whatever, for a legit thing, and then just spit out 20 to 30% of your content on like self-help stuff. So like people follow you for the things you're actually doing, and then if they look up to you, they get to like get some residual, like not specific to that career advice, just like life advice. It's probably the better way. It's just when you go 100%, my whole life is teaching you how to have a better life instead of having my own life. It's kind of little, that's a little weird.
The biggest thing I always had, like the issue that I always had with any kind of self help, is like, oh, you're poor. Pay me $50 a month, and I'll make you not poor. It's like, sounds a little counterintuitive. That $50 could just be invested. So I always saw that as kind of like, that doesn't really make sense to me. Like, pay me the rest of your money, and that will somehow get you more money. And it's like, eh,
There's a
you know,
cruel truth to that in a very small bit. Because like I used to work for a bankruptcy attorney, and
Mm.
it's kind of like, well, you're super broke, but then if you pay me a couple grand or whatever it was, then you can kind of keep some of your money, even though you like the rest gets lost in the bankruptcy or whatever. And
Yeah,
so, and at the same time, after a while, this guy got out of the business because he's like, look, he's like, I'm like a lawyer, but I'm broke, and I realize it sounds stupid to say it when you say it out loud, but like my whole business model was earning money off of people who don't have any. It's like, there is that. So
yeah,
that's the kind of that's kind of like the thing with like the crypto influencer thing too, is like I don't know if there's such a thing as a successful crypto trader other than someone who's made some trades that were successful. But like as far as there might be some, but that's like beyond my, it's like a professional gambler. It's like, well, there's a couple professional poker players, but like mostly no. And so I just
yeah.
try to put my expertise around something that I actually know about, which is being a user of this stuff. And then just like, all right, well, like who are you to say about anything? Well, that's who I am, and take it or leave it, I guess.
Yeah, because you're only as good as like your last trade, and a lot of these crypto signal groups and all these kinds of things are just like ripping off other groups, and it's just like this consistent like cycle that's just like repeating itself and like feeding off of itself. And you've got like, I can't remember who, but there was like all these things where people were just like joining signal groups, copying it, mirroring it to their own group, starting a new signal group, and it was just like a mirror of a mirror of a mirror of a mirror. And then it sort of worked in a way just because they had so many people buying up this thing, but then obviously they all get like dumped on or whatever. And yeah, it's a wild time.
Yeah, like what happened to Solana recently. Whew, it's a little rough, but it's probably a good time to officially start the show. All right, guys, let me hit the intro. We get going. Well, hey everyone, happy Friday, the last Friday of the year. I'm joined by the number one ham, Scott Cunningham, aka Scott C Business. How's it going?
It's going good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. With that number one ham thing, where did you come up with that? Was it just a play on your last name?
Yeah, it's literally just like number one fan, Cunningham, number one ham. Pretty simple. I mean, a lot of time people think I'm saying like number one hand or like something else, and then I always have to like be very explicit that like that's what I'm saying.
Yes, it's not kosher or halal. It's ham.
Yeah.
So for everyone watching, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe and all that fun stuff. And if you have one of my NFTs, go to the super chat, say some stuff, and we'll talk about it. And if not, well, you should have one. There's a link in the description, but whatever. We'll do that after the show. Let me hit on this spicy stuff here. So, starting with Alameda Wallet's funnel over 1.7 million via crypto mixers overnight. Data negates the possibility of liquidators behind the fund transactions due to the use of mixing tools and extensive planning to hide transaction paths. So, someone is clearly making off with the the FTX funds. And by the way,
that seems like a low number, actually.
Yeah.
Unless that's just what they're aware of, I guess.
Yeah, that hit the mixers. But SBF, which I don't get how this guy's still out on Twitter there, but he says, none of these are me. I'm not, it couldn't be moving any of those funds. I don't have access to them anymore. Well, I don't know how much there is to say about that other than just like the hot take. Like, the gift that keeps on giving, even after Christmas. Do you have any conspiracy theories on who it is who has all the money?
I mean, I would imagine it's like him or his girlfriend or one of the people in their polyamorous relationship, or just, some middleman. What I think is more interesting is that he paid a $250 million bail, but it was like, obviously that's the people's money, not his money. So it's like, why that's even allowed seems really weird to me. But
yeah, so I really wish I had read more on the actual bail bit, because from my memory, there was something to the effect of his parents did it was some kind of like, I've heard two rumors, right? And maybe this is even better for the show to like not have any education on the subject at all. But I heard two rumors. Let's get them both going. So the first was that it was his parents who like put up their like real estate as collateral to get him out. It was like worth $250 million or something. And I also heard of it was I forget the terminology, but basically it was, I promise to pay $250 million if I don't, if I screw up the bail conditions. But it wasn't like he gave it. He just said, I'm good for it, bro. It's like they gave a $250 million IOU. It's so, yeah. I don't understand that kind of defeats the purpose of bail entirely, right? But
you'd also think that someone who's done what he's done, that like you wouldn't even get the option.
Yeah. And I guess that's kind of an interesting point of view or something to think about with this whole thing, is
because even if he does pay it, it's like that's just the people's money that you're giving to the government then.
Allegedly. And that's where it gets dicey with these situations. Like, I personally think that every bit of money that he has is like stolen money, pretty much. I mean, that's what I think. Now, where it gets a little bit like, and legally it gets a little bit maybe dicier, because you'd have to like go through like court proceedings and actually say like, no, you owe this much here, therefore any money that you're holding on to, you owe to that. Or, you know, I mean, obviously if they can determine that some of the funds were actually customer funds, like this stuff in his money, in his wallet right now, came from the customer funds here, obviously that can be, you know, confiscated or whatever. But if some of these are company profits, right? Because the company did exist, it did have profits, it did have revenue at least, and he did have a salary. And so like if you get, let's just say you get paid $1 million to run your company, and then you steal $10 million. If you pay $1 million bail, which million was it? Was it part of the 10 you stole, or was it the one that you earned? I mean, that's where it gets a little dicey about like not saying he has no money now. I mean, kind of, but like, it's a little tough.
Well, you'd think that they would just say, okay, it's all bad money, just like they would with like a drug bust, right? Like anything that you have is seizable asset, because they can't tell if it needs to be proven or not. They're like, okay, well, it's probably all connected.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing is, I guess when you have a drug bust, because drugs are viewed as, you know, they're illegal entirely, anything made from them is considered to be like sketchy stuff. Whereas,
and even if you didn't, and they don't know for sure, they'll still take it. But that's only for like drug related charges.
Yeah, usually. Which is, you know, it's kind of a lot of the nonsense of the drug war and all that. But the thing about in the case of like a theft, like this was allegedly an above board business. At least on paper, on the idea sounds above board, right? As in, there's lots of crypto exchanges. You run one, it's okay. And it's like, okay, well then there's missing money. And the thing is, as far as I know, the individual known as Sam Bankman-Fried and his actual theft of customer funds, I don't think that's been proven yet. It's just everyone knows exactly what's happened, because a lot of money disappeared. They should have had money. Where did it go? He says he doesn't know. You know, like, I think it's pretty obvious what happened. However, it's going to take a long time to actually connect all the pieces and like go through that wire fraud signal group that they had and like all the other stuff and just prove that this happened. But until now, it could just be gross. I mean, it's not, but it could just be gross incompetence that, you know, he just lost all this money. Whoops, I don't know how it happened, you know? So I guess they have to establish that before they just determine he has no money.
Yeah. And the crazy thing too, like just to slightly change gears a little bit, I don't know if you followed the Logan Paul Crypto Zoo kind of expose. It just seems crazy that you could run a scam, and then, you know, when things come to light and you need to pay a fine or whatever, you're already running a new scam to pay for the previous scam. Yes. He's already launched a new NFT project to raise money for his probably future SEC lawsuit.
Yeah, so like, also, is the lawsuit more than what he ended up making? Because if not, then it's just, you're always going to take that. You know, it's just like the cost. Yeah. If the cost to steal, the price of stealing is less than how much you make in the theft. It's like with what happened with like some of those crypto orgs that were sued by the SEC, like EOS. Like EOS paid a big fat fine, but compared to what they'd raised, it was like nothing. So, you know.
Yeah, I mean, they made the most expensive domain acquisition in history. So clearly, and it was for nothing. Like, voice isn't really like anything. So like, they clearly have money to just throw at the wall, which is crazy. But
yeah, and that's the crazy thing about all this stuff is having just so much money like floating all around, and some point it just doesn't like, it just doesn't do any good. Which, kind of brings me to Solana. I didn't have that as an actual planned news story on this thing, but Solana's been in tanking recently. There's a lot of connections with FTX, and a lot of people, dumping on that stuff.
Oh yeah,
I have for
95% down in the year.
For the record, I have never said a positive thing about Solana, and it doesn't make me some sort of a clairvoyant genius to say that though either. It's not like you couldn't tell, but like from massive centralization to blockchain breaking all the time to the founders lying about how many tokens existed and who had them, and like just all that, and then just doing dumb stuff like buying sneaker stores and stuff. It's just all terrible. And it's funny because like at some point you had like people like Melania Trump were putting out NFT collections on Solana, and like you had there was a lot of actual traction on Solana for a little while. I think you could just buy your way to a certain level, but then at some point it just like, I still don't understand the point of like, so here's my opinion, right? As like a decentralization advocate and things like that. The only reason you need an Ethereum killer is because you want faster, cheaper transactions for your stuff. I mean, it's a gross oversimplification. There's lots of reasons like privacy and other things like that. But the big problem is, slow and expensive. And so if you're going to get something faster and cheaper, but you don't care about decentralization, just like do it on Polygon, which is honestly what the market's been doing, right? Lots of stuff is in migrating to Polygon and some other L2s or whatever they try to call them. But like Polygon's run by like a 5 of 8 or 5 of 9 multi-sig or something like that. And most of those keys are in the hands of the founders. It's not entirely centralized, but they could figure something out. And it's just kind of like, it's the ETH killer. It's like the ETH killers that people were looking for turned out to end up being L2s. And that's just kind of the way it ended up going. So I don't really see the benefit.
Unless we get the Surge upgrade in the next 3 months.
Which one is that?
Fingers crossed. It's the next phase of Ethereum's upgrade, which that's the actual one that brings the gas fee changes. They said they'll scale it from 10 transactions per second or whatever it is now, 10 or 15 to like 10,000. And by the end of the 3 phases, it'll be 100,000.
Yeah. So what does it do for
supposedly
for scalability? Like anything to increase the gas limit or something? Like, so you have more transactions?
So the Surge, the main upgrade for the Surge is the introduction of the side chains. Where they will be able to run all of the transactions on a side chain and then send that all as one single transaction to the main chain to effectively scale like 100x per side chain, but then they'll have 100 side chains, for example.
Yeah. And so
then 100 transactions would each have like 1,000 within them or whatever, and they'll scale it out like that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting with the ETH scaling plans and stuff is I don't know if you're familiar with Justin Bonds of Saber Capital, but he's Mr. Tweet Thread who shits on everything. And it is in a good way. I mean, he's a very well researched guy, obviously.
Yeah.
But he hasn't publicly criticized ETH too much, but he has criticized the L2 scaling option. Like basically, L2s tend to sacrifice a lot of like decentralization, immutability, no matter how they kind of work, and basically massive L1 scalability is like the one thing he's like really looking for. So like for someone like him, like Ethereum is close to what he's looking for, but he wants on-chain governance that really works, which ETH doesn't really have. It's just kind of like, kind of hodgepodgey. and
Hmm.
also wants massive on-chain scalability, whereas it seems like they're trying to L2 everything with Ethereum.
Yeah.
So if to the ETH scale, the ETH killer concept, I would definitely say I don't really see an ETH killer coming along unless it does a couple of key things differently. It has to be as or more decentralized. It has to scale, natively and be fast and cheap, obviously, and then just have a few other little improvements for like efficiency or like privacy or whatever else. So it's not just like I do this, but on this, it's like no, I do something completely different and better. And I think like privacy is going to be one of those
Hmm.
things. The challenge with ETH is the way everything's sort of bolt on. Like there's a smart contract for that, like private, like Tornado Cash, for example, and those kinds of things. Smart contract operations end up being quite expensive. It's so like with USDC and their block lists, it just becomes like 40% more expensive
Yes.
than DAI. It's just like
Yes. Yes.
everything
Yes.
costs because you got to like bolt it on and then just run a specific script just to get a basic feature like privacy.
And it's only like 100 or less addresses that are blacklisted that's making it cost like 40% more or whatever. So it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine that? Like, can you imagine having to actually apply like a widespread block like blacklisting kind of thing to this? Just like the usability issues that would cause.
Yeah, like imagine like 10 years from now when they've got like thousands or hundreds of thousands of blocked addresses and it's costing you like 200-300% more. It's crazy.
Yeah. So it's kind
Because
of
we're paying, like you pay as the end user for their censorship, which is like even crazier. They're not even taking on that cost.
yeah, and that's the insane bit about like you just want some basic privacy and then you got to like use it, or you want to use this thing and it all gets baked into that. And so I think that if you find something that has like, so for example, I know almost nothing about Cardano. I just did not pay attention to it
Yeah.
there, but like having a UTXO model for a privacy perspective does improve a lot of things, and at least makes them less like egregious as like your one address has everything and your entire life history right in it. But I mean,
Hmm.
obviously, it comes with its own issues. But like, for example, I know there's a few, like I know some of the folks over at Railgun making stuff like that for to add like high level privacy to Ethereum. But if it's like a smart contract, then it's still going to be horrendously expensive to like run like zero knowledge proof your smart contract, like add that into the thing, and then all of a sudden it just like kind of gets even worse.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like when I think about ETH killers, like I made a video on this like a long time ago and I basically said, because I talked with Hishoshi about this, if you know him, and he made a good point where he said having like cheap transactions and faster transactions is really just like the baseline of being like an ETH killer. Like that's not going to actually do anything. That's the very first thing you have to do, and that's just like to start because you've got Cardano. There's barely any DApps on it. Like there's not a whole lot going on. Solana's, drink every time the chain goes down, take a shot every time the chain goes down. That's the ongoing joke. All these chains, they don't really have much going on, and even if they do, it's just something that already exists on Ethereum. Um, or like they just have some tokens or whatever, and there's not really any innovative or novel reason to use that instead, aside from gas fees, unless you believe that the surge or whatever is going to actually improve Ethereum, and then it would have been a waste of time to try to build on any of these other chains. The only chain that I actually see having any like real, no, I wouldn't say a lot of innovation, but real adoption is Binance, and that's just because they've got so many connections and they're making all these partnerships and deals. I think they could maybe be a competitor just because of that. Not that I think they're really doing anything novel on Binance Smart Chain, but they have the adoption coming in. So that's the only one that I would actually like consider. Although it's obviously, a lot more centralized, and I don't like Binance, so I'm not a huge fan.
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest, Binance Smart Chain is just a lot of ways for the company to keep hold of slash capture a lot of activity that's going out of centralized institutions, and just be like,
Yeah.
well, we'll have our own decentralized institution, kind of. So it's like I think probably in the future, exchanges are going to sort of migrate to like basically being DEX front ends and with fiat
Hmm.
on ramps. And I mean, like, so for example, Thor Wallet already has an integration with, I think, Mount Pelerin or one of those exchanges, whatever. But basically, you can buy with a certain limit. You can buy crypto KYC free with a certain limit. I don't know how the Swiss figured that
Yeah.
out, but you could do that for a certain limit, and then just like swap to any other asset, like basically on the platform, and it's all like, other than that one little bit, it's all like DEX. And so, like, why do you need to actually sign up for exchange account other than, it's more newbie friendly? And, at some point, all the DEX world gets newbie friendly, and then that's kind of it. So I think Binance is,
Yeah.
because CZ's not an idiot. He's looking far out, and he's seeing that this is the way the world's probably going to go, and he just wants to be part of it. He's not going to let his business be obsoleted. So he's just over time migrating Binance to being like a top player in the allegedly decentralized world. And
Hmm.
I don't think like, and at some point, if whatever he's doing starts to become, if being too centralized starts to become an actual issue, I don't see him actually, I don't see a problem with him actually like, I think it'd be likely that he would purposely decentralize enough aspects of Binance Smart Chain to just shut people up and keep using it, as long as he has,
Yeah.
as long as he
No, that's
profits
fair.
from it, there you go.
Yeah. And yeah, speaking of Thorchain, I will say Cosmos is definitely doing some innovative and novel stuff. So
Hmm.
I do think Atom and Cosmos is actually pretty good. And I do invest in Atom and Cosmos because I actually think they're doing some interesting stuff. The staking model works fine. And yeah, definitely like Thorchain is probably their most novel
Hmm.
thing that they got going on. I think Althea is also kind of interesting, though I haven't really like tested it or like gotten deep into that, but it's like an alternative internet provider hosted on Cosmos.
Yeah, there's something about like, I didn't pay attention to Cosmos in the slightest, and I still am a little fuzzy on it. But when you start to see things pop up that are like built off of it, it's kind of like when everyone starts using zero knowledge proofs, like the zero
Hmm.
coin protocol, or zero cash protocol, or whatever. Then you start like, oh, okay, they're working on something interesting. And I mean, obviously, Thorchain, and then there's some Thorchain forks launching pretty soon as well. So all that's
Oh,
like
that's good.
Cosmos. And then
Hmm.
like a year or so ago, maybe a year and a half ago, that the Dash team started to research Cosmos for like the data sidechain. And so like Tendermint consensus, like what it uses, and they made their fork of it called Tender Dash, which then a name might have to change or whatever. But basically, like a lot of projects are starting to pull in little bits of how Cosmos works. So that's definitely
Hmm.
something. And of course, it's one of those ultimate things of like how much of this ultimately translates back to the bottom line of holders of Cosmos itself, or is it all just like,
Hopefully a little bit because I
yeah,
am invested.
yeah, that would be fun. One of the funniest thing, the first time I heard about Cosmos is probably right around when it launched. There's this app called Aircoins, which is like an augmented reality, like Pokemon Go type thing, that they
Oh,
they
okay.
just like chucked a bunch of like Cosmos like in your world around you, and you go, oh, cling cling, start like collecting some Cosmos. That's the first I ever heard about it.
Okay.
I used to call that app the shitcoin vacuum, because you just like walk
Yeah.
around and just vacuum up shitcoins wherever you go, and then they're never
That's
worth
funny.
anything. But I got like $5 out of it.
Yeah.
So let's hit on this.
Yeah. I mean,
Sorry. keep going.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, I mean, I really think that Cosmos is doing good stuff, and like, it's good to see, an alternative that isn't just like, oh well, hey, we're cheaper and faster than Ethereum. They're actually like doing novel projects, and that's what I always say. Like, you have to actually have something that isn't already offered elsewhere, that is, providing some useful kind of use case or some novel thing. And I think Cosmos is actually doing that. So that's really good to see, because even like Binance, who has so many resources and so much going on, they don't really have any like projects specific to the Binance Smart Chain that it's like, oh, it's just on there and it's very novel and interesting. There isn't really anything there. So yeah, I think it's interesting.
Yeah, which is one of those things that kind of makes me think about, like we talk about novel things. One of the least, I don't want to get any hate by saying this, one of the least novel, yet oddly more successful projects out there is Litecoin. Because I don't know if you've looked, but Litecoin's done pretty well price-wise recently, especially against Bitcoin. And maybe that's just because it dumped against Bitcoin before, but whatever. And then also transaction volumes, like almost 100,000 every day, like around half of the Bitcoin volume. And after the Lightbringer game went down, I thought that those transactions go off, but like not really. They kind of kept up. And, according to like BitPay statistics, have like Litecoin is number 2 with like a big chunk, like 27% of transactions or something. Like, it's, and I wonder how much of that is just like,
What's number 1? Is it Dash, or
I'm sure it's Bitcoin.
Cash?
BitPay unfortunately doesn't take Dash at all. I've been annoyed at that. Let me just look it up. Actually, let me just, now that we're just like mentioning that casually, even though I talked about it last week, I might as well put it up on the screen real quick. There we go. So some BitPay stats, just for curiosity. Most commonly used in transactions. So as you can see, like right here, November, 41% was Bitcoin, 27% was Litecoin, then ETH at 11, then Doge, then USDC. Bitcoin Cash is down at 3.12%, which is a little surprising because you'd think that would be the top cash coin, the top Bitcoin alternative. But Litecoin's clearly crushed that. And I know like BitPay did promote BCH a lot and stuff. So maybe it has something to do with, oops, hold on a second. Doesn't look like,
quickly check the transaction fees and compare them here.
Yeah. Let me check this thing real quick, because it doesn't look like the, after I scrolled, it doesn't look like the article thing reset. Oh wait, no wonder I'm on the wrong thing.
That's weird.
I gotta scroll
the site
down
that
here.
we use, BitInfo charts, for
Yes.
some reason doesn't have any data on Litecoin after July.
Yeah, that's weird because they did have. I do remember when they stopped giving that info, but I thought it was just a brief, like their node crashed, they had to put it back on.
No, it's just the average transaction, like the median transaction fee and stuff like that is still tracked. But it is higher, so that is really interesting. Like it's more than double the cost of Dash or Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah, I think at some level, it like when you're talking about payments, anything below 1 or 2 cents USD doesn't matter.
That's fair.
Yeah, so Litecoin has over 108,000 transactions last 24 hours.
Yeah, they're definitely like way more transactions
Than like a lot of things. And like Bitcoin, actually over 10 times what Bitcoin Cash has as of like right around now. Which is like...
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it's crazy.
Which is like, all right. I mean, not legal tender anywhere, not anything. And some of it might be... it might be like the race to like the digital cash top. And I'm trying to like always wrap my head around the way the markets tend to work out, because I think the Mimblewimble hype might have been a lot, because if you think about it,
It's also way more than Doge, even, which is interesting. 5 times more than Doge.
it's kind of funny because after Doge got its Elon pump, its transaction count went down significantly because the
Yeah.
price per transaction ended up going up with the price. So, that part doesn't surprise me. But like, Litecoin's famous for being like the faster, nimbler Bitcoin. And even though you have something like, let's say, Dash that has instant confirmations, not you have to like specifically check for that. Like you have to do a small change in your infrastructure in order to receive that, like to understand that. Everything else is a copy paste of Bitcoin's implementation. Can just see confirmations. And since Litecoin has 2.5 minute confirmations, so does Dash. So it's equally fast for a lot of processors, for example. And they're just like,
Yeah.
oh, it's cheap. Oh, it's fast. It's everywhere, kind of. Yeah, sure, we'll do it. And then you add in like an extra bit of privacy. Now, everything that Litecoin's done until now has been sort of like a copy paste of a lot of stuff. Like, oh, we're going to do SegWit. Oh, we're going to add Lightning, which no one uses on Litecoin. Oh, we're going to do this and that. And then Mimblewimble was the first one where, even though it was sort of a copy paste to a certain extent, again, I haven't looked too much into the implementation, but they're by far the biggest, the dominant Mimblewimble chain out there by now. Like Grin and Beam and all of them are way down on the rankings. So to a certain extent, they're kind of the top, the top chain for a privacy feature. It's kind of strange. So all in all, I guess it's just at some point, if there's scaling problems with Litecoin, people are going to move on. If the privacy doesn't keep up or whatever, or it doesn't get implemented properly in mobile wallets or whatever, people might move on. If other things, et cetera, if like the confirmations aren't that fast or whatever, and people get used to it, then people move on. But until then, it seems like it's like, according to the market selector, like why would you use Bitcoin Cash? If it's confusing, it's in fewer places, some people hate it, and it's 10 minutes for confirmation. So I guess under all that, it makes sense that Litecoin's out there, like, doing well. It's just that from a lot of other fundamental reasons, you'd be like, why the hell? So it's just kind of funny, like, seeing the way the market selects for things.
Yeah, and speaking of Bitcoin Cash, I mean, there's definitely been a bit of a downtrend ever since Cash stopped tipping people.
Yeah. And that was what Mark DeMazel given his donation.
Yeah, and I said this every time I did a report. I like Cash, great platform, could end any day unexpectedly, and that's exactly what happened. And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's donation funded, and the devs were anonymous and didn't communicate with the community. So it's like at any point it could just be done. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, not to not to make things too sunny here, but we have the MicroStrategy thing, right? MicroStrategy Bitcoin purchase divides the community. Basically, MicroStrategy started buying Bitcoin. Ooh, like what else is new, right? That's kind of like the only thing. Yeah. I don't even know what they do. I don't even know what they are. I don't know anything about them other than this crazy, ugly, laser-eyed guy is always talking about buying Bitcoin with the company. But the point that I was interesting looking at, at least they're finally buying the dip, it looks like. And they say they increased their Bitcoin holdings by 2,500 Bitcoin, blah, blah, blah. Currently holds 132,500 Bitcoin acquired for $4.03 billion at an average price of $30,397 per Bitcoin. That's the interesting part, right? So that's a high average, especially considering you just like bought the dip, right? Now, if Bitcoin goes up to 60,000 again, or 100,000, or whatever it ends up being, that's going to look really smart. Right now,
but then they're going to dump on the entire market, and then everyone's going to hate them.
If they dump. If not, then they just hold on more, which I don't know what the point of holding if you never dump, but whatever. Like, then you just hold even more, and then it crashes back down to, like, let's just say 50,000 or something. I'm just pulling numbers out of my ass here. Granted, it goes down to 50,000, and then now it's like, oh, we have an average buy-in for 55,000 a coin now because they keep buying. It's like, okay, well, that's your micro strategy. What's your macro strategy? Like, where does this go in the end? I think it's gonna be interesting because Homeboy wasn't really into Bitcoin until recently. So yeah, that's kind of it's going to be kind of interesting. I wonder if he has the conviction to keep going through all this, or but it's some.
I mean, it seems like it. Yeah,
It's just some idle speculation. Like I think like if anyone bought any Bitcoin basically during the 2017 bull run, that Bitcoin is high likelihood of being worth more today. Not entirely high because it did peak at around 20 grand, and it's what is it now? I haven't even paid attention.
My answer is always confusing because I just have the Canadian value.
Okay, well let me find the people's value, the real value.
Real value. All right.
To give them 16,500 about. So yeah, I mean it was above.
Damn, that's so low.
Yeah, it was below that for most of 2017. But it's just like if you're there, like it's kind of funny the way. And whenever I troll them on Twitter, because that's what Twitter's for. I refer to Saylor as the CEO of Bitcoin because they always say like Bitcoin has no CEO, and I'm like, yeah, what about this guy? Because for like the self-appointed kind of CEO of Bitcoin, he's not really doing super well on it. And it's like if you've been in to Bitcoin, like let's just take the year 2017 onward, for like 80% of that time, maybe if you bought for like, you would be well above Saylor's average right now. Like, and that's only that's not even going back to like the 2015s, 2013s, and then like the really early days. It's like that's just like during this time, I guess. Like, and then El Salvador started to like DCA into stuff. Said, like, we're gonna buy a lot, crash. Oh, we're gonna buy a lot, it crashes. Right, crash. Now like, well, we'll just buy a little bit over time, it'll be okay. So,
yeah.
All right.
They're mining. They're mining from the volcano.
Yeah. How's that volcano energy?
Yeah.
I might as well. I saw this on your timeline. I might as well annoy some people with it. Good old HEX,
yeah.
Right? Welcome to the world of Richard Hart, and then about PulseChain 2 more weeks, etc., etc. This whole HEX thing has been quite interesting to watch because very beginning scam with some interesting tokenomic like designs, and it just as such I'm just like, yeah, I don't care. And then some got an interesting cult following, and then kind of did well for a while considering other things, but now seems to be shaking out. And at some point, right when you're starting to get towards the top, starting to get top E, then he's like, oh, PulseChain, it's going to be like Ethereum but better or something, which, for me is a pretty obvious cash grab, but like some people I guess bought into it, and then they just like move on to that. And I think that at this point it's starting to become like it's obvious, and I don't think Richard Hart's trying to keep this going, really, is if I were to guess. It's been entertaining watching him buy all the most ugly clothing you could possibly imagine for the most astronomical high prices. I mean,
he's just trying to lock all of his money into real world assets before HEX goes to zero.
I almost think that like he's like, as a scammer, he's trying to scam. He's trying to become a little bit more transparent of a scammer all the time, because I think the transparency of it makes more people realize he's a scammer, but also makes some people who are too dumb really buy in harder. Like, look at this poor gentleman there in the comment there. I love HEX and buying on the dits. Richard will make people rich. Always buy when people are fearful. Richard will always make people rich. Like,
Yeah, very cult following esque.
Yeah, they're gonna get wrecked really hard. So that's kind of the that's kind of where I see. I don't really see it going anywhere. It's an unfortunate situation that people have gotten like scammed into that kind of stuff. But at the same time, most crypto doesn't do anything, or maybe hypothetically does things, so it doesn't actually do anything. And most of what it does is it goes up or down in value. And the price chart for Hex looks a lot like the price chart for most good projects. Like maybe it's a
Yeah,
little worse, but not that much worse. It just everything does all this stuff, and you know, I can, yeah.
that's why I always say for scams, like price is never a legitimizing factor because too
Hmm.
often do you hear people say like, yeah, but it's top 50 or it's top 30 or look at the transaction volume, like the price is up this many X, and it's like, yeah, until it's not. Like
Hmm.
I had so many people commenting on my video criticizing Theta. Oh, looks like this aged poorly. And then I go back 6 months later and Theta's less than 1 cent, down like 99%. It's like, oh, I guess it didn't age poorly. It was just like, it's like, it just depends how
You aged
long you
poorly,
wait.
you know.
Yeah, like it just depends how long you wait. Like, and now here we are, and Theta's way, 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 way down, and the whole NFT craze with Theta is completely blown over, and now it's back to basically being a scam again. So it's just funny, like when people try to use price as like a way to legitimize something, and it's like, yeah, I mean, FTX was the second largest exchange until it wasn't. So, you know,
Yeah, that happens. And one thing I'm trying to like obviously like consistent transaction volume helps, although that's easy, way too easy to fake when fees are low. But
hmm
also bear market survival helps. And one you can always survive one bear market, but when you're hitting when how you're doing in the middle of the second bear market is where you start to see what you're really made of. It's kind of crazy to see. So like I don't really look at the market cap rankings, but then people were like I checked a couple of charts versus Bitcoin, for example. Like Monero did pretty well. Monero and Litecoin I think did the best. But then you have other stuff like Zcash and Dash and even Bitcoin Cash doing okay. But it was kind of crazy to see, like, because I have a bunch of friends in the Dash community, especially, that's like the one thing I hear the most about. So people are saying that like Dash jumped like 25 spots in Coin Market Cap in the last few months, like in the bear
oh,
market.
okay.
Like not by going up in value, but just by not crashing like a turd. And
Yeah,
so
just preserving. Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of coins that are still around from the early days are the same. Like if they're still around, they prove some sort of a value. They're still here, and it's like
Tron always manages to surprise me that it's still around.
yeah, Tron is kind of like the real ETH killer. Like as far as uh, it's managed to just be fast, cheap. Like
I made a video about this though, that
hmm
if there was an ETH killer, it would have been Tron, but it's not
yeah,
because it's centralized and all they ever made was gambling apps.
gambling apps, and I think something like the number three most used crypto on Bitrefill for like buying real goods and services is USDT on
Yeah.
Tron. And it just
Yes. Yes. Yes.
it's useful. It's like people want to use dollars, they can't use it via their bank, and they can't afford it on Ethereum on the main chain. So
I was a little worried that him launching USDD, I believe it's called, like the decentralized quote unquote algorithmic stablecoin on Tron, which can only fail, would really hurt Tron though in the long term. So I'm curious to see how that plays out.
yeah. So let me jump to this thing real quick as we wrap up. I've been way too much going on in my life. I'm really busy, but I've been trying to work on something for the new year. Obviously, looking like the end of January again, everyone's like, "Oh, it's gonna launch by the," and it's just like, well, how long can I stretch it out and still keep my promise? But like, I got to do a reboot of how to live on crypto, just to instead of like a bunch of little videos, I'll do like one video that has timestamps and chapters, and it's a
Yeah.
little more thorough as I keep diving into this thing more. And as part of it, I'm working on my ugly website, but eventually it'll be not ugly, but there's just one little page. I have this little, I'm starting to do a sortable list of all the services you need to actually live on crypto. So, for example,
Oh, that's good.
this
Yeah.
right here. This was just this week because I just put it through. These are the ones where you can pay your bills. Now, I didn't finish it. Obviously, there's a couple in Canada. Like, what was the one that you were using?
I don't know. I think they introduced KYC, so I kind of got screwed there.
Wow,
But I think it was called.
is bit something with a bit in it?
I'll find it. I can find it here.
Yeah, and full disclosure, most of these, maybe not the European ones, but most of these are KYC services, right? Because at least in the US, you cannot get away from KYC if you're doing a bill payment service, because bills, utility bills, stuff that are tied to your address are a form of establishing KYC to begin with. Like, how do
Oh,
you get
it's
your,
bitcoinwell.com.
yeah. So I'll add that to it too, as well as like,
But it is KYC though, so
yeah. So let's like, so for example, if you want to pay with Litecoin and you're in Europe, these are the ones that you can pay at. It just, you can sort it really quickly. So hopefully it should be where I give the overview video of this is how you live on crypto, right? And then after that, you're just like, okay, well, what do I do for my country, my specific thing? And you can just find, here's your bill pay service, here's how you spend it around town, here's the this and the that and blah, blah. And you just,
yeah.
and then update it as it goes on, because the problem with the video is you film it and then the next week it's inaccurate. Like, for example,
Yeah.
one thing on this thing, and I'm, dragging out a little bit, but if you see Bitrefill says region supported El Salvador and the USA. Guess what? Not the USA anymore. They had to temporarily suspend their bill pay program in the US because some banking partner got spooked. Hopefully they'll be back, but it's not 100% guaranteed. And so Spritz Finance just came out of nowhere in the last few months. I saw an ad for them on Brave, and in the beginning they only let you pay your bills with Polygon. I'm like, what the hell is this? No one uses Polygon to live on. And then now they're like, have all the what do they call it, the DeFi coins or the whatever, the Web3 coins, and they're trying to expand to other stuff. So like if they add a UTXO coin or something, then I'm gonna have to add that in. And so yeah. So I just have a resource where everyone can just see, and then just like everyone who wants to live on crypto can just live on crypto, and it's not just like do all the annoying ass research that I do. So if you guys do
You just
that,
gotta throw up a couple ads from like Bitrefill on the top or whatever, and then you're set.
well, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna try to get like referral codes for all the links to those things to help. But
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
like I'll probably just charge consulting stuff if people want to know, they want like personal attention, not just like look at this list. It's like, oh, how can I do that? So yeah. So that's kind of the big project I'm working on. Is, as always, I try to do something useful for people. How to live on crypto is useful. And yeah, there we go. So why don't you shill all your stuff and then we'll wrap this thing up.
Sure. So Scott C at Scott C Business everywhere. You can also find my podcast, Crypto and Things. Usually I'm talking about
Crypto,
earning
but sometimes
crypto
about
and
things.
sometimes about the things. Doing a little less reporting on my like monthly earnings and stuff like that, and trying to focus more on some of the bigger concepts and less about the day to day, because I mean, also like in the bear market, it's getting pretty bad. I mean, Cash just shut down basically in terms of their monetization. So, it's not super easy to do socialfy, as it were, anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll still keep some tabs on it and, let people know how that's going. And if things start to really tick back up, presumably in the next bull run, then I'll probably start that up again. But yeah, in the next little while, I want to focus more on, wallet reviews, like what exchanges don't have KYC, and, just providing like lists and breaking things down for people to refer to. Just getting more stuff like that out, more usable things rather than just my like tracking of what's going on. I tracked all of my earnings in all these social platforms for like
Yeah.
3+ years. And I think it's time to sort of conclude that and say it's not super reliable to earn on SocialFi right now, but it's definitely possible to earn, and you can earn a decent amount. I ended with about $40,000 earned over 3 years.
It's nice.
So, it's not nothing.
Yeah, it's a good little supplement to like if you don't like not have a job, right? Like if you have a job, an extra little 40K over a few years on the side is like, that's nice.
Yeah, especially if it's like to do something interesting versus like, I mean, you could have a side hustle that's interesting, but like it's more fun to create content and, do what we're doing versus like, I don't know, doing some sort of like side consulting business or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's wrap this thing up. Thanks very much for being on. You have my NFT, so you can go do all that cool stuff.
Absolutely.
And yeah, next is the Dash Podcast, episode 200. Got to 200 of these freaking things. So if you're watching,
Nice.
stay on. Not stay on the same link. It's a different link. But yeah, come on and watch that stuff. And then everyone, I hope you enjoyed your train wreck of a not crazy 2022. It's been a great year for me, but it's been hilariously bad watching the crypto world. So enjoy that. And here's to my little gross coffee cup. Here's to 2023 being much, much better even. So cheers, guys. I'll see
Cheers.
see you either in like 2 minutes or next week.